Well, hello there and welcome in. It is the very first look at the 2024 NCAA tournament as part of college basketball coast to coast, the show, the podcast, and we are live as we do this on Selection Sunday night. I am merely the somewhat capable host, TJ Reeves. I'm going to have all kinds of help tonight on the college basketball coast to coast social platforms, as well as we're live streaming on TuneIn, and you may be hearing us in podcast form after the fact in college basketball coast to coast with the likes of Chris Daubertine, who is here with us already right away on the show from bloggingthebracket.com. What did that committee get right? What did they not get right? Chris is about to have thoughts. My wingman, Ari Russell, who's been with me as well for the better part of about 20 years now, Sirius XM, Fox Sports Radio days, now on TuneIn and college basketball coast to coast, the show and the podcast. Ari was at the Big East championship win for UConn over Marquette on Saturday night. UConn, the defending champs. A lot of people believe it could be back-to-back for UConn. Ari's going to get thoughts on that. Thank you for finding us on all the platforms. College Basketball Coast to Coast YouTube page. Go subscribe there. CBB Coast to Coast on Twitter. We're on Facebook Live as well. Share it out. More people will find us and see us. And we're coming your way live streaming on TuneIn this evening as well with the live Selection Sunday night reaction show on college basketball coast to coast. With all the intros out of the way, and there's other guests coming. We look forward to talking to Matt Zemek out west about the bracket. He's kind of our West Coast bureau chief, a longtime national college basketball writer, now writing for the USA Today Trojans Wire website. Tyler Jones of the Jones Report is in the Southwest in the Big 12 footprint. He's due to be with us in a little bit. Those guys, Deshaun Tate of Tate's Take the podcast, my wingman, Jason Powers. I don't know who else we can cram into this show, but we're going to try to do that over the next, let's say, 60 to 70 minutes here on college basketball coast to coast. So this is all fresh. Chris Daubertine, welcome from bloggingthebracket.com. I give the first swings to you in the opportunity to take a look at that field of 68. And give me thoughts on what the 2024 committee got right or got wrong. Good to have you. We have a bracket, sir. Hello.
Yes, we have a bracket. It's not a very good bracket, in my opinion, but we have a bracket. This committee, to me, was just way too in love with brand names. There are just so many examples here of teams being overseeded based solely on resume alone. Gonzaga, Michigan State, Texas A&M, Virginia getting in. Granted, I had Oklahoma as, one of the last teams, and that was my miss. But, Virginia over a team like Indiana State or Pitt or Seton Hall, who are the other teams along with Oklahoma in the first four out group, I just can't believe that Virginia, made it. There were just so many just weird choices that I was just completely surprised pretty much throughout the entire reveal of the bracket this evening.
Give me another example here of something that you just your jaw was open when you saw it. What was the first one of those?
Well, the easiest one for me was FAU. I mean, FAU as an 8 seed when they, one thing that I had really been, looking at, over the past few years, the committee had really punished teams. Yeah, you might get in based on your wins, but if you had a couple bad losses in there, we're going to ding you in seeding. And they did not do that at all this year. It seems like St. Mary's was seeded higher than they probably should have been. I already mentioned A&M whose record is, 7-5 against, quad 3 and 4 teams. They ended up not even making it into the play-in round. They're a 9 seed. And the other thing, thinking about Michigan State, why they're a 9 seed, Ken Pomeroy actually said something, yesterday. It's like a lot of these teams, that are like Michigan State that have these ridiculous 9-13 records against quad 1 or 2, 7-12 like Oklahoma had. The committee really needs to look a little bit closer at these resumes and see if these teams are really all that deserving compared to teams that, maybe they don't get the opportunities that a power conference team has, but they do, like Appalachian State, who was perfect against quad 1 and quad 2, even though they played, I think it was 3 or 4 games against the group. Why do these, then there were so many profiles like that this year. TCU, Oklahoma, Michigan State. You look at kind of the middle of the Big Ten, the lower tier of the Big Ten, and the middle of the Big 12 in particular. You saw a lot of these profiles where it's like these are all the same. These are all just kind of meh, but they're going to probably get in because they, won 5 good games, during league play in a power conference.
Again, you are checking us out here as part of College Basketball Coast to Coast Selection Sunday night show. We are live here on all of the platforms, including TuneIn this evening of College Basketball Coast to Coast, YouTube, Twitter, as well as Facebook. Thank you for finding us here on the show immediately after the field of 68 is set for the men's 2024 NCAA tournament. 8 sites will get underway later this week. Well, the first 4 is actually in Dayton, so 9 sites. And then it will all eventually whittle down to 4 teams in Glendale, Arizona. We'll be there live for College Basketball Coast to Coast, the live show, the podcast, etc. And I am merely TJ Reeves. You're hearing the voice there of Chris Daubertine of bloggingthebracket.com with immediate reaction. Ari Russell is also with me at Ari Russell on Twitter, part of College Basketball Coast to Coast for the better part, again, of about 20 years. Follow up on what Chris had to say. What did they get right? What did they get wrong, that committee, in your estimation, at least first reaction to it?
Yeah, I mean, I can't really go as in deep as Chris can because he's obviously someone that follows like the real numbers throughout the year. And kind of it to me, what it seems is that this quad thing that they didn't really abide by it. It seemed from doing their, filling out their bracket, the committee. So it's like, all right, so what the heck does that what does those parameters mean? Like if you're not even abiding by them in a consistent fashion. I will say, it stinks for Indiana State being left out. I know someone on YouTube said that. I think I would have liked to see Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in the tournament. Big kind of, viral sensation, but a really good player, a team that,
Robbie Avila, right, is the player you're talking about.
Right. But, kind of like an old school George Mikan type game, in this fast paced world. But, they had a great RPI. They had a great, ranking prior. I think they're the lowest or the highest team never to I think they were like 28 or something like that
in the net ranking.
Yep.
Correct.
So I think they got kind of screwed. I saw St. John's on Thursday play Seton Hall. Granted, St. John's had really a trip up, and then Rick Pitino really, got into his kids, and that team really started playing much better. I thought down the stretch they looked really good. They gave UConn a hell of a run. I mean, probably played UConn as good as anybody has in a long time. Just didn't have the firepower to. No one really does. I thought that they, I saw them on Thursday against Seton Hall. Seton Hall, one of the last 4 out. St. John's not even on that list. And I saw them play. I was like, this team looks like they're ready for the tournament. They didn't make it. So, what do I know? I don't know anything. I usually get all my brackets wrong. I'm out by the first 5 by usually 2:00 Eastern time. My brackets usually
on Thursday by about 2 hours in.
Right.
Interesting on St. John's, and Chris, follow up on this. They do have out of conference win over Utah, which is a top 50 win earlier in the year in Charleston. Yep. I'm looking at what else, not anything else really strong out of the conference, but obviously in the conference, they got the Creighton win at home. They did get the win over Seton Hall in the Big East tournament. 4 quad 1 wins total, but 10 quad 1 losses. So despite the net ranking of 32, they're not in. Is it just a case for St. John's that they had too many opportunities that they didn't take advantage of, do you believe, in the committee's eyes with the 10 quad 1 defeats?
Yeah, but like I said, that could go for pretty much any of the teams on seed line 8 all the way down. I mean, there was a major problem this year with the fact that I'm going to have to go look and see. I think it feels like we have more double-digit loss teams in the field than we have previously, and I know a lot of it's because you play a longer schedule now. I think that, parity, transfer portal, things like that have made, teams so much more even that's going to be more likely. But it's just very, very strange. And when you're in these power conferences, of course, you're playing all these games against teams that are ranked in that quad 1, quad 2 bucket, depending on the location. And you're able to rack up these really, really gaudy records, sometimes in a bad way, like with St. John's, like with Oklahoma, who, as I said, got left out with like a 5-12 quad one record. But to Ari's point, yes, they want to have it both ways with the net. They want the net to be, what the RPI was, but then they also say, no, we only use it as an organizational tool. Well, which one is it? It's got to, it has to mean something, or it doesn't mean anything at all.
The host loves to say, pick a lane, right, Ari? Right, Chris?
Yeah.
Pick a lane. What is your lane? Are we going by quality wins? Are we going by that number next to the name? Or what are we going by? Chris, did they get something right in your mind? Does North Carolina deserve to be the 4 seed, even though they lost the ACC tournament over Tennessee, over Arizona, because both of those teams didn't even make the championship game of the conference tournament? Did they get that right as the fourth number 1 seed?
Yeah, that was one thing they got right. They actually did a pretty good job, particularly lower down the bracket in terms of, I think, getting teams seated correctly. But a lot of the times those are the easiest things to do. The one thing that kind of shocked me was that the 2 Birmingham teams, I had UAB as a 13 and Sanford as a 12, and they ended up flipping those 2. That was kind of the one thing lower down the bracket that kind of jumped out.
I think Jason Powers pointed this out to me. They shipped 3 of the Alabama teams out to Spokane, Washington, by the way, which, again, that would kind of underscore that they don't really look at the bracket. They do to an extent. They try to help out the teams seeded 1 through 16 to stay in their region. But that's fascinating that Auburn won the SEC today on Sunday, beating Florida badly, and they got to go play in Spokane, Chris. So,
the funny thing is, you think back to when they started the pod system. The reason they started the pod system was because all these, like Maryland, Georgetown, George Mason, Georgia State, a whole bunch of Eastern teams played in Boise back when things weren't as flexible as they were.
Right.
And that was the whole reason they broke up the pods, from being too, glued to a region to this kind of flexible system we've had over the past, 23 years. And we still get that every so often because you're going to have a Western side a lot of the time where you're not going to have a natural fit if it's a down year for the Pac-12 or a down year for the WCC. And, now that the Pac-12 is going away, it's going to be interesting to see how they do that in the future.
Voice of Chris Daubertine, bloggingthebracket.com. Ari Russell's also here. I'm TJ Reeves. We're live on the college basketball coast-to-coast platforms, Twitter, YouTube, as well as Facebook, and our live tune-in channel. If you're hearing us after the fact in podcast form, thank you. Subscribe on Apple, Spreaker, Spotify, and podcast form. Chris does a phenomenal job of promoting us through bloggingthebracket.com. We're promoting away socially. Share the show out. Be with us all the way through March. We're going to have recap shows rolling for March Madness as it unfolds. We're going to be live at the Final Four. All the platforms. Subscribe, follow them. We'll be live on these platforms with previews, reaction shows, the whole bit. Ari, back to you. What else would you say they got right? You saw Marquette, even without Tyler Kolek, play valiantly in the Big East. They still reward them as a 2 seed, I think in large part because Marquette showed something in New York the last 72 hours. Did they get that right? Some would say they're not a 2 seed if Kolek can't play, but is that more of a reward for how good their regular season and their Big East tournament was? What do you think, Ari, you saw the Marquette Golden Eagles?
Look, honestly, I thought that they kept up with UConn pretty valiantly. Boy, I tell you what, both those teams at the beginning of that first half couldn't, hit the side of a barn. I mean, it was brutal. I mean, it was like 2-2. It was like 2-2 under the, I think at the or 4-4 at like the under 12. I felt like I was watching, basketball before Sweetwater Clifton came into the NBA. So it was like it was crazy. It was bad, but then it picked up, but they looked really good. They looked tough. They got their best player wasn't playing, obviously. That, and they still get at you defensively. I think they played probably as good a defense against UConn as you can, really. That, obviously UConn has, the big guys, one on the starting, one on the bench. I think it had like 22 points, 16 rebounds, something ridiculous. And he would have more. He missed a bunch of point blank ones as well. So Marquette, I think they got that one right, to be honest with you. Again, they made it all the way to Saturday night, played valiantly without their best player, probably one of the best guards in the country. just tells you that this team is really, really good. And Shaka Smart, we know what he can do at this time of year too.
I want an opinion from both of you, and then we're going to excuse both Chris and Ari. We got other guests coming on college basketball coast to coast. Give me an upset that jumped right off the page. I mean, everybody, I'm just going to taint it for a second. Everybody's going to point right to McNeese against Gonzaga in the 12-5 game. Will Wade's McNeese team won 30 games in the small Southland Conference, but he's got 2 or 3 transfers from other big-time programs. They've been under the radar. Gonzaga has been good at the end of the year. Everybody's got that one. So let's exclude that one's being debated. Chris, is there another upset that you think is brewing somewhere?
Well, the other one that was kind of popular was JMU over Wisconsin. 7-10s aren't really upsets, but, Drake against Washington State in Omaha, I think that's going to be something to keep an eye on. Looking further down was obviously, I think Kansas and Samford is going to be, a battle for Kansas, especially if Hunter Dickinson isn't back. They're already shorthanded. They already play a short rotation anyway. That could be very tough for them. And it's in Salt Lake City. So there's going to be, altitude. So that's something to very much keep in mind there.
I will throw one in too, New Mexico. And I thought it was interesting that Charles McClellan, the head of the committee, admitted that they were not going to be in had they not won the automatic bid with San Diego State. That surprised me because I thought with the wins over Boise State and Colorado State on a neutral floor that did more than enough. Here we go again. New Mexico's got plenty of wins and a decent metric, but he basically said had they not won the automatic bid, they were not going to be in. I just saw that team. Maybe it's recency bias, but I'm looking at them as an 11 against a Clemson team as a 6 that's taken bad loss after bad loss. I'm licking my chops on that one, Chris.
Yeah, it's also funny that you mentioned, that New Mexico would not have been in. We're not, even with those wins. And those wins are, Colorado State and Boise State, who both end up in Dayton.
They're in the tournament, and they beat them on a neutral floor, and the Mountain West got 6 teams in. Ari Russell, is there an upset that jumps out at you besides what we've been talking about, or maybe you want to reinforce one of the ones we've been talking about?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few I'm looking at. Grand Canyon, I've always liked them. They've got a pro on their roster. St. Mary's, is one of those teams. Like, again, like I always thought that they're better, as a higher seed than a lower seed. Kind of like what Gonzaga was struggling with at some point when they became so successful. I just think Grand Canyon's got a squad, man. I think that's a good one. It's hard because everyone always wants to pick a 12-5, and I don't want to make that cliche. There's another one that's looming here that I don't think many people are going to be talking about, but is intriguing as heck to me. I'm just not sold on Arizona, man. Honestly, this Long Beach State story, Dan Monson is a coach with was long in the tooth, has had a lot of experience, and they fired him. There's something about that scenario right there that jumps out at me. I mean, they won their conference tournament. He was fired, and he's going to go into the NCAA tournament against Arizona as a 15 seed. There's just something that jumps out at me right there. That's just intriguing. It's an opiate right there.
They lost as a 2 seed Arizona last year to Princeton. So you wouldn't think that it could happen again. But then again, what a story with Long Beach. We were out in Las Vegas on this channel on college basketball coast to coast for the Mountain West championship. And I can tell you, it had a little buzz. It had a little murmur. The coach who's fired is going to go to the NCAA tournament. That was going on late last night when the Dan Munson interviews were happening and the whole bit. And now they draw Arizona as a 15 against a 2. So
what happens now, though? Like, what if they beat Arizona? Like, for real? Like, do they be like, no, just kidding, we didn't mean that? Like, what do you do? Or is he going to be like, screw you, peace?
He's been there 17 years. This is one of those things that you don't want that to get out before the tournament's played, and it got out. And now they've won the Big West tournament in Las Vegas, beating UC Davis last night, and Long Beach with a losing record is in.
Lucius Harris isn't walking through that door.
The beach gets ready to play Arizona. Hey, Chris, with all of the anarchy that went on with NC State getting a spot, we now know New Mexico getting a spot, UAB today, Duquesne today getting a spot. This is as fascinating a last 24 hours as we've had in recent years in the NCAA tournament, with teams that weren't supposed to be in and weren't going to be in had they not gotten the automatic bid getting in. Put it in perspective real quick. Chris Daubertine of bloggingthebracket.com.
I mean, the fact that you have a 10-line game for a first 4 game, that right there just kind of tells you everything, because then you have, New Mexico, Oregon, NC State, all those surprise winners ended up on seed number 11, pushing those last few at-larges, up the seed list a bit to kind of force that. That was kind of the thing to me, and I'm still shocked that, the results that, we were kind of thinking last night that, NC State by winning had knocked Virginia out. Well, that didn't happen. That wasn't it. It really has just been, unbelievable the way that this has gone over the past 2 days. It made things a lot easier for me, though. I had a pretty relaxing Selection Sunday, which usually does not happen at all.
Voice of Chris Daubertine. We're going to excuse he and Ari Russell here in just a second. Final four. You don't have to give me a whole Final Four, but who do you think? I mean, UConn's probably the given. Everybody's going to take UConn to be there in Arizona. All right, so we all agree. Ari, give me another Final Four team, or maybe give me 3 more.
I mean, oh man, like I'm still like, I want Houston badly. I'm scared. I'm going to take them.
What was that last night? Was that a team that realized we're a 1 seed already and we're just going to pull back in the second half and get beat down by 25 or 30 in the Big 12 title game? What was that, Ari?
That's what scares me about them, because like they have probably one of the best defenses in the country. Like they get at you, right? But they have problems scoring sometimes. And even in that TCU game where they really choked them, man, they missed a lot of point blank layups in that game. A lot of open shots. They miss a lot of open shots. That's what I'm worried about. I still think though, like I'm looking at the bracket, there's nobody defensively that I'm really concerned about on that side of the bracket. Kentucky is a team that could easily lose to Oakland in the first round, but also go to the Final Four. They have a trouble defending people, though. So, like they'll give up a lot of points. They might beat you, like, almost. They remind me kind of the old Paul Ball. They run it. They'll run you. They'll score 100. But they'll give up 98. So. But I'm still going with Houston, and I really, 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 really want Purdue, even though I hate number 1 seeds usually. I really want Purdue to finally break this mold. Finally, maybe they have it up to them this year. That's last year they bowed out so quickly. I'm hoping for them to be it, but I'm not sure, man. It's their history.
We know because we were there in Minnesota. The last team to blow it against a 16 seed. Virginia turned around the next year and did what? Won the national title. I'm not saying Purdue's going to win the national title, but you have to believe that in the back of their mind, it's kind of the same thing. Let's show everybody and shut everybody up. Now, granted, again, they did not win the Wisconsin semifinal game. They have a litany, Matt Painter, of losses for whatever it's worth against teams they're not supposed to lose to in the NCAA tournament. Or maybe it is Purdue's year. Chris, you buying that even for a second about Purdue as a possible Final Four team?
Well, the possible Final Four team I was going to mention is from their region, actually, and that's Creighton. And I'm looking at the bracket here, and the left side of the bracket, there are 3, usual like, they couldn't have possibly meant for that to happen in the design. You think about Creighton's second round game is potentially against Oregon, Dana Altman's former employer. You look below that, Texas and Tennessee could meet in the second round, and then you go up to the South region, and the 8-9 game is Nebraska and A&M, who just took Nebraska's athletic director, Terry Alberts, to College Station. So that's a very interesting kind of setup there. But I think that Creighton, because, Purdue, I think Purdue's guard play is going to be a problem if they actually, have to face a team that has decent guards. And I think, I'm not buying Tennessee, especially after they got blown out in the SEC tournament. I think Creighton has a really good shot to come out of that Midwest bracket.
All right, great stuff from both of you guys. Thank you to both Ari Russell and Chris Daubertine here with me on College Basketball Coast to Coast. Any final thoughts? Anything else that I didn't cover or I didn't prompt you with? Ari, you first. Anything else?
Look, I'm depressed because my Miami Hurricanes had a 10-game losing streak. So, my interest in the tournament is still very high regardless. I'm just looking, I can't wait till Thursday, man. Like, and being in Barclays, I'm happy that the matchups FAU. They did a good job with Wisconsin's got a good contingent in this area. Obviously, Duke is a big school, national powerhouse as well. So I'm excited for actually being and watching these games at Barclays. I think we've had some good teams and good games.
By the way, you're going to slide in there in the A10 tournament. We had a first where Duquesne was winning the game, and suddenly early in the second half, the confetti streamer started to fall, and it delayed the game. And then suddenly VCU, Virginia Commonwealth, went on a run after that. Ari, one of your roles is to go inspect and make sure we don't have a confetti problem at Barclays Center for the NCAA tournament this weekend. Can you go handle that? Get with the building maintenance people and make sure that we don't have a confetti issue with the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, make sure Jay-Z, since that's his borough, has got it handled down. So, my connection with Jay-Z is obviously.
We look forward to you being back with us later in the week, Ari, from Brooklyn. Thank you so much. Chris Daubertine, anything else that we didn't prompt you with before we're excusing you guys?
Well, we have 2 16 seeds who are making their first ever trip after, being in Division I for a long time in Stetson and Grambling, who, of course, Grambling was like a historically bad program not too long ago in the SWAC. And you also have Duquesne, who won the very first Eastern 8 precursor to the Atlantic 10 tournament in 1977, coached by Keith Dambrot, who was LeBron James's coach in high school and before that. And his dad was a Duquesne alum, so that's why he took that job. So he's brought them back in a league that's now twice as big as it was, almost twice as big as it was when it was formed, 47 years later for the first time at the tournament.
They've been waiting for a while for Duquesne. They've been waiting forever in places like Stetson and Grambling, and we got to wait a couple more days before the first 4, and then the field of 64 will play 16 games on Thursday, 16 more on Friday. We'll eventually narrow down to 4 in Arizona. Guys, thank you. I appreciate it from Ari Russell and Chris Daubertine on our Selection Sunday night show. Gentlemen, be well. I'll be back in touch. Chris, great job blogging the bracket.
Thank you so much.
Go to bloggingthebracket.com. We have loved your insight all throughout the year. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
There goes Chris. There goes Ari. Again, I'm merely TJ Reeves hanging here as part of college basketball coast to coast. And we've got others that are going to be joining the program here on this Selection Sunday night. We look forward to all the insight and all the analysis of all of our different analysts. Matt Zimick will be up here in a few minutes. Our West Coast Bureau Chief, what did they get right? What did they get wrong from a Western perspective? Fascinating. 6 Mountain West teams do get in, and because of the Oregon automatic bid, 4 Pac-12 teams get in. They did take Colorado in the first 4, and the Buffaloes will be in a first 4 game as a 10 seed. That is fascinating. They had bracket mayhem. So Colorado and Boise State will play a first 4 game, and likewise another 10 seed matchup will have Michigan State in the other first 4 game with Sparty. I'm looking down my list here. I lost it right off the bat on where Michigan State is. That is Colorado State, or actually Virginia and Colorado State, excuse me. Virginia, Colorado State. The last 4 in, by the way, from the committee, as we do that now, here on college basketball coast to coast and the live platforms. The last 4 in, according to the committee and what they put out just a little while ago, Boise State, Colorado, obviously, and Virginia and Colorado State. So those 2 teams, those 4 teams will play as 10 seeds. Those are the last 4 in. Colorado State was the very last team, the 68th team, apparently in. Then Oklahoma, Seton Hall, Indiana State, and Pitt, which means had we had 2 less bid stealers out of like UAB, Duquesne, NC State, Oregon, the bid stealing wins. NC State got one on Saturday night. So did Oregon Saturday night late. If we hadn't had all the bid stealers, Oklahoma was the first team out. Seton Hall was the second team out, according to the committee. Then Indiana State, then Pitt. And one of the things we keep coming back to, win your games, win the automatic bid, just like UAB did, just like NC State did, just like Oregon did, just like Duquesne did. None of those teams were anywhere. They weren't they not only weren't on the stove, they weren't in the kitchen to be on the front burner, yet they are in the front burner. They are in the NCAA tournament. So we look forward to seeing what those teams are going to do. How about Michigan State? Not only not in the first four, but they're all the way in as what, a 9 seed. That's what Chris Daubertine was talking about a few moments ago. All right, Matt Zimick is going to hop in here. West Coast Bureau Chief, TrojansWire.com, the USA Today website. I love your insight and analysis. I'm looking forward to also Adam Zagoria joining us in a moment, who covers the East. We got the East and the West covered. Mr. Zimick, welcome on College Basketball Coast to Coast, the live Selection Sunday show. They may be hearing us in podcast form after the fact. We're doing this right after the bracket release on Sunday night. Good to have you. Welcome. All right, so you have the floor for the moment. What did they get right, that selection committee? And then maybe what did they get wrong? Probably more the case, what did they get wrong? But give me a couple things.
Well, the biggest concern on Selection Sunday is there an outrageous exclusion? Did a team which absolutely 100% deserved to be in the tournament get left out? We did not have that. We did not have such an instance. Like, we were sweating Colorado State. When we saw Boise State in the first four, we were thinking, is Colorado State going to get left out? And so the Rams get in. Now, I don't think they should have gone to Dayton, but they got in. And so compared to Mountain West, whose teams were underseeded, I think, pretty widely, being underseeded is one thing, but you're still in the dance. In the Big East, I know Adam Zagoria is going to have a few things to say about this, since that's his beat. But I just want to mention briefly, none of the Big East bubble teams getting in. Johnny's, Hall, Providence, 0 for 3. That is, I think, the big national story of Selection Sunday, at least in terms of the bubble. None of those teams got in. And if you're the Big East, like, you have this electric, popular conference tournament at Madison Square Garden, the world's most famous arena. You have this electric atmosphere, fans buy in, the place is packed. And yet, none of this stuff really seemed to matter. And that is really my annual gripe with the committee. It looks past these conference tournament results. And people will say, oh, well, St. John's beating Seton Hall kept the Hall out of the tournament. Okay, to that extent, that game mattered. But St. John's was below Seton Hall on the seed list.
Correct.
Even while beating Seton Hall by nearly 20 points. And then St. John's played a really good game against UConn. And the Johnnies were still didn't rise above Seton Hall. I don't get it. I don't get that. And also, the other really glaring example of the committee ignoring conference tournament results, Florida Atlantic lost to Temple on Saturday, and yet was an 8. Now, you cannot tell me with a straight face that FAU deserved to be an 8 seed, anywhere close. Like, the ceiling for FAU should have been a 10 seed. And for many,
the argument, I'm not saying this is my argument. I'm not saying this is my argument, but the argument is that their out-of-conference wins carried the day to help them with seeding. Now, we can snicker at that because by the same token, you look metrically at the American Conference, it's the 9th best conference, and Florida Atlantic lost 4 times in the regular season, and then, or actually, yes, 4 times in the regular season, then lost to Temple in the semifinal game. So that kind of, in my mind, that negates whatever you did out of the conference in terms of putting you high up on the list. I believe that's kind of what you're saying as well.
Absolutely. And so Florida Atlantic beat Arizona, but like, that was its one real high end win. But after that, like, Florida Atlantic was not beating other number 1 and number 2 seed level teams. And then Florida Atlantic kept stumbling in the AAC toward the end of the season, would pick up a loss here, pick up a loss there to a middle of the pack opponent in the conference. So, losing to Temple should have at least dinged FAU in terms of seeding. It shouldn't have knocked them out, but like, that's another glaring example of the committee just ignoring tournament results. One more thing, TJ, and that is Virginia beat Boston College in overtime, and then lost to North Carolina State, which was, got in through the auto bid, but was not an at-large quality NCAA tournament team. And yet Virginia gets in while other teams, such as St. John's, such as Providence, which beat Creighton, other teams were scoring high-end wins over really good NCAA tournament teams. I mean, Creighton's a number 3 seed. Providence beat them, and yet Virginia gets in just on the basis of a win over Boston College. You can't tell me that in most cases the committee was looking at results of conference tournaments, and it raises the idea of why do these conferences play these tournaments if they're not going to matter in the eyes of the committee.
Yeah, they keep saying that over and over again. So Matt, stand by. We're going to add Adam Zagoria in here in just a second, who covered the Big East tournament last night, and he's going to have that beef right away, I know, with why are we playing the Big East tournament for the likes of Seton Hall, St. John's, Villanova, and even Providence starting to make a run on the neutral floor if you're not going to include those results. So let me get Adam Zagoria in here as well on college basketball coast to coast. Just pick it up on that point, my friend. I mean, we kept talking. We thought 5 Big East teams, if not 6. It turns out to be the 3 amigos, UConn, Marquette, and Creighton. So welcome, my friend. How shocked were you when those selections came up and they didn't include either St. John's, Seton Hall, or Villanova?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I've kind of been gearing up and preparing for this for the last day or two. You know, you look at all the bracketology guys, I talked to them. They all had Seton Hall and St. John's sliding down. I mean, look, there were 4 or 5 bid steals in all these conferences. I'm sure you guys have talked about it. You know, the ACC, the American, the Mountain West. So, you know, they just had Charles McClellan on CBS. He said there were 5 bid steals from these leagues. In the past 2 years combined, there were 3. So I think it's just an unfortunate set of circumstances that, you know, Seton Hall is a team that had 5 quad 1 wins. They beat Connecticut by 15 points, guys, 15. And they beat Purdue and Marquette. And, you know, St. John's is out. And Pitino's already said they're not going to play the NIT. So
interesting.
Yeah, this is a league that at one point, you know, you thought could have 5 or 6 guys. I was kind of making fun of Jerry Palm from CBS saying they only had 3 a month ago. And it turns out he was right.
Yeah. Just give me a quick comment or two, because Adam is working at NJ.com and also his Zags blog. He's working everything, getting quotes, putting stuff up. Matt can appreciate this too here on college basketball coast to coast. So I don't want to keep you too long here. Give me a thought. Did they get something else wrong? Did they get something right in your mind? Did they? I keep asking. Did they get the 4th number 1 seed right with North Carolina, or should it have been somebody else?
No, I think that's about right. I mean, you know, just in listening to all the talking heads and looking at the bracket, I mean, Connecticut's got a really pretty tough draw here. You know, I'm going to be covering them in Brooklyn. They have 4 conference tournament champions in their bracket. You know, Jay Williams and Jay Billis were just talking about it. You know, they got Illinois, Auburn, Yale,
Iowa State,
and Iowa State all in their bracket. That's 4 conference champs.
And I just worked the San Diego State New Mexico game last night, and San Diego State lost the game, but they're no joke either. They were in the Final Four. They got 4 pieces back from the Final Four team last year. I think the East is by far the toughest draw for why you just laid that out. Illinois, Big Ten champ, Iowa State, Big 12 champ.
Yeah.
That's a tough road.
Yeah, they'd have to play, you know, Auburn in the Sweet 16, which is a really good team, and Iowa State in the Elite 8. The good news for Connecticut is they're not going to have to board an airplane here for the next couple weeks. The games are in Brooklyn and Boston, so that's good for them. But that is a tough bracket. Purdue looks to me like, you know, maybe they have the easiest bracket here.
But can we trust them? We were talking about that earlier before you came on. They've lost repeatedly, not just the 16 seed last year. Remember, they lost to St. Peter's. You know that. You covered it. They lost to St. Peter's when they had 5 days to prepare for a 15 seed. I know it's different players, but can we trust Purdue to go deep? Adam, quick take.
I mean, I think if they get past the first round, they can go deep. But, yeah, they've lost to a double-digit seed the last 3 years. Look, they have the best player in the country. They've got a great coach. You got to think that, they'll be able to get past the first round. What do they got? Arkansas State and who's the other one?
They end up
Montana State
or Grambling, and then they get either Utah State or TCU in the 8-9 game if they're there. Real quick while I have you, Marquette acquitted itself well without Tyler Kolek. We don't know his situation with the oblique injury. Did it surprise you that the committee rewarded them even still as a 2 seed, Adam Zagoria, with the way – obviously they were paying attention to the way they played without him in New York, obviously.
Yeah, I think they said, Danny Gavitt said yesterday or the day before that they expected Tyler Kolek and Hunter Dickinson from Kansas to be healthy for the tournament. Obviously, they were told that by the coaches. I think Marquette kept Tyler out for precautionary reasons. I'm sure he wanted to play last night. You know, it's a Big East championship game, and they lost. But you could get a Marquette-Kentucky Sweet 16 there, which could be a lot of fun.
You're tremendous. Keep up the good work at NJ.com as well as the Zags blog, Adam Zagori. I know you got to scoot because you're getting coaches' conference calls that are going to hear about. I don't know what I mean. Is Dan Hurley going to gripe about how tough his bracket is? He's got
I don't know. He's about to come up here with the ESPN guys. I'm going to see, and I also want to see. Also curious if Seton Hall is going to play in the NIT or.
Yeah. Interesting that some of these programs are just saying no NIT for us. Interesting that you've reported to us that Rick Pitino has said St. John's no thank you.
Yeah, a bunch of teams already said no too. I think like Indiana and Ole Miss, right, and maybe Memphis.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right, Adam, great work. Thank you. We will continue to lean on you. Have fun in Brooklyn with this. I appreciate you hanging with us. I know you're busy here on Selection Sunday night on the live show. Thank you.
All right, guys, take it easy. Thanks.
There you go. We appreciate him hanging. So Matt Zimick. Thank you for stepping aside there. We appreciate Adam's insight. You have any reaction to anything he said, or you want to jump in on anything he said there with that?
Not a whole lot to add. So Purdue came up. If the committee wanted to give Purdue the best possible chance of going to the Final Four, this is what the bracket would have looked like. And notice one specific thing about Purdue's path in the Midwest, TJ. This is very unlikely, right, with the health issues facing Kansas. Unless Kansas, as the 4, wins that region, you're either going to see a first-time Final Four team or a team that's snapping a very long Final Four drought. Purdue hasn't been there since our friend Mark Wise in 1980. And then Tennessee, never. Creighton, the 3 seed, never. So you're likely to get a fresh face at the Final Four. And I always like to say brackets shape stories. So by shepherding Purdue, Tennessee, and Creighton into the same region, you're likely to get a really big, really great story at the Final Four. Because Samford might take out Kansas in the first round, but even if Kansas is able to get into the Sweet 16, the Jayhawks are not full strength. I have to like that matchup. If I was Purdue, when Gene Cady and the big dog, Glenn Robinson, made the Elite Eight in 1994, Kansas with Roy Williams was the opponent in the Sweet 16.
But you look at the rest of that. You've got Kansas, damaged goods, injury to McCullough, injury to Dickinson. We don't know. I love this too, and Adam reported it. They call the teams and say, is your star player going to be able to play? Matt, what are they going to say? No, he's got no shot.
Yeah, really.
He's got no shot to play. Of course they're going to say, yeah, he's playing. Seat us where you need to seat us there. He's playing. All right. So Kansas damaged goods. This just into the newsroom. There are questions about Rick Barnes in March. They lost again to Mississippi State and looked awful in the game. That's the 2 seed. Creighton, while they have some wins, they took that upset loss in the Big East tournament. I don't know. What else is there? Gonzaga as the 5. Many people believe McNeese is going to beat them in the 12-5 game. This thing could be wide open for Purdue. Could be. Hey, real quick.
And let's remember, TJ, last time Purdue and Tennessee came really close to making the Final Four, they played in the Sweet 16 in 2019. That was the Carson-Edwards game.
Tremendous game.
Yes. So Purdue and Tennessee once again.
I think the lead changed hands either 2 or 3 times in the final 10, 15 seconds of the game for that one. Tremendous game. All right, I didn't want to short you before we have to run along, and you do as well. Give me some more on the West. Oregon, obviously, bid stealer, gets the 4th bid for the Pac-12, beating Colorado. It looks like forever the final Pac-12 basketball game is Oregon beating Colorado. How fitting. No UCLA, no Arizona. All right, thoughts on that? Thoughts on 6 Mountain West teams, including the committee chair, Charles McClellan, saying tonight that if New Mexico had not won the game with San Diego State, they were excluded. They were going to be one of the last teams out, but they were a bid stealer. Thoughts on the rest of the West real quick. The floor is yours.
Yeah. So, well, if you're New Mexico, you're just really relieved that you got it done and that you didn't have to avoid a snub, because that would have been a bad snub. Because like y'all thought New Mexico had to win 2 games. You remember New Mexico played Air Force on Wednesday, so that was number one, and then it absolutely had to beat Boise State to get in. But then beating Colorado State on Friday in the semis, that should have punched the ticket for sure, and yet it didn't. So relief for New Mexico. And with the Mountain West, these teams are underseeded, no question. But you could be the Big East where your teams didn't get in. So better to be underseeded, but get in. Whole different world in terms of snubs being respected, whatnot. The Mountain West got all 6 of its teams in, and then in the Pac-12, man, 2 weeks ago we were thinking 2-bid Pac-12, and then the Pac-12 goes to Vegas and hits the jackpot, doubling its winnings to 4. And just the big story, which made this all possible, is Oregon was down 14 to Arizona in the Pac-12 semis. 14. And Arizona absolutely obliterated Oregon in Tucson a few weeks ago, and it easily handled Oregon by close to 10 points in Eugene. So Arizona goes up 14 in that first Pac-12 semifinal on Friday, and you're thinking game over. Like Arizona was like a 12-point favorite, I think, to begin with. In that game. So when Arizona went up 30-16, I don't know, but like Arizona was probably like a live 21-point favorite on the online sports books, and Oregon comes all the way back to win, and Oregon holds Arizona under 60 points. So just really that remarkable turnaround is what made all of this possible for Oregon to steal the bid and for the Pac-12 to get 14. That's pretty wild. I think, that Colorado winning 2 games this week, it absolutely had to beat Washington State on Friday in the semifinals. That got Colorado in. So I think, committee treated Colorado fairly, and I think going to Dayton's appropriate for Colorado since the Pac-12 was a fairly weak league. So you don't give Colorado the ticket all the way into the round of 64. You send Colorado to Dayton. Hey, win a good non-conference game, which Colorado did not do. Colorado beat the Miami Hurricanes, but that did not turn out to be a quality win given the unexpectedly bad season Miami had. So I like Colorado being in the first 4 in Dayton.
All right. By the way, I've been asking everybody this. Just give me the quick take. Give me an upset. I mean, everybody loves McNeese. Everybody loves McNeese. McNeese over Kansas. You like Samford over Kansas is one that comes to mind. Besides UConn, and a lot of people are going to take Houston, even though what was that in the Big 12 title game? Give me another Final Four.
It always does well at that Big 12 tournament in Kansas City. It's
be down by 30 and not scoring. It's almost like they just decided, okay, we know we're a number 1 seed.
Really.
What's the point?
Yeah.
But give me another team. Give me another team that might be or you think will be in the Final Four in Arizona besides those 2.
So let's briefly look at that. I think that the brackets were really favorable for the 1 seeds. Like North Carolina getting paired with Arizona, I think that's a great pairing for the Tar Heels. I don't see some really heavy hitters in that West region for North Carolina. So I'm not sold on North Carolina. My view, TJ, is that it's UConn as the clear-cut favorite. Houston is a distant but still clear second, and then it's everybody else. And so, I'm not sold on North Carolina, but I think the West bracket shapes up well for the Tar Heels. One thing about bracketing, UConn did get some tougher teams in its region, but UConn's the best team, so I don't think it's going to matter. You have to be angry if you're Iowa State because you crushed Houston, number 2 team, or at least number 1 seed, but by almost 30 points, and you get thrown into UConn's region. Iowa State should have been with North Carolina, and Arizona should have been with UConn. If we're using bracketing principles where the strongest 1 seed plays the weakest 2 seed, and the weakest 1 seed plays the strongest 2 seed, balanced bracket, that's how it should have been. Arizona should be with UConn. Iowa State should be with North Carolina. So if I'm Iowa State, I am PO'd. I'm definitely PO'd.
But Matt, they don't look at these things. They don't peek, except there's all kinds of policies where they have to look at it, like conference teams can't play each other in the first round, so they have to look at it for that reason. But I mean, we just happen to have the UConn FAU second round game that we would have gotten in the national championship game had Lamont Butler, if not hit the shot. And most of the players are back for Florida Atlantic, and some of the players are back for UConn. Wink, wink. That just happens to be there in the second round. Dana Altman and Oregon in the tournament, and he's potentially playing his old school where he was forever at Creighton in the second round. I know some of this may coincidentally happen, but again, a North Carolina-Arizona regional final where Caleb Love's going against his old school as a storyline. Just wink, wink. Happens to be there. Rick Barnes potentially playing Texas in the second round. Wink, wink. Nudge, nudge. Rodney Terry's his former assistant. We got a storyline. Just saying. Anything else in closing? Then we're going to get moving here on this Selection Sunday Night show here on all the platforms for college basketball coast to coast. Anything else?
Yeah, so just UConn, Houston, North Carolina, and I don't trust any of the teams in the Midwest region, but I distrust Purdue and Tennessee more than anyone else. So I'm going to take Creighton just as an anti-Purdue, anti-Tennessee vote. The Boilermakers involved, they need to prove it before I pick them. So I'm just going to go with Creighton. Not because I'm in love with the Jays,
I understand.
Just because Purdue and Tennessee, you have to prove it, period.
But, I mean, if you are really believing that Purdue and Tennessee aren't the team, then the argument is, who is the team? Is it Creighton? Is it a damaged Kansas? Is it a Gonzaga that a lot of people think are going to lose?
Gonzaga being a 5 seed without winning the WCC tournament, without winning the season series against St. Mary's. That's another example of the committee just completely ignoring a conference tournament results. That takes us back full circle to the conference tournaments just get ignored every year.
We heard Charles McClellan. Sure, we heard Charles McClellan say it again tonight that we look at the whole. He said the whole body of work, the whole season. If you're not looking at the conference tournament championship game result as part of the whole season, you're not looking at the whole season, which is what you're saying as well. Again, TrojansWire.usatoday.com is where we find Matt Zimick. Love his insight. We'll be around you as well in the Phoenix-Glendale area for the Final Four, young man, on college basketball coast to coast. All right, we're back to all the bracketology. We had a couple of days to get the bracket all filled out. I appreciate you helping me out with it, my friend. Great stuff.
Thanks. And my just quick 5-second commercial. Follow Trojans Wire for USC women's tournament coverage. Trojans are supposed to be a number 1 seed. Come on over here.
Juju Watkins, the freshman. If you've not seen her, she's got Caitlin Clark type cachet. We'll see what happens with that. Matt, thank you.
Thank you, TJ.
All right, there we go. Matt Zimick hanging with us on college basketball coast to coast. By the way, I have neglected to mention or have this up on the screen, but our sponsor, Ticket Smarter, wants you to know if you're trying to get in the game for the NCAA tournament, for all the Dayton region, the 9 sites that are going to be for the opening round at Dayton in the first 4, and then for this weekend, Ticket Smarter mobile app, most competitive prices on the secondary market. Your purchase is safe and secure, and we've got a promo code for college basketball coast to coast, Coast20. Take $20 off your order of $300 or more with Coast20. You're not going to get 2 great seats at the Barclays Center or at the FedEx Forum in Memphis, and on down the list for these different sites, these different regions, for anything less than $300. So Coast20 will help you save. Ticket Smarter, the Ticket Smarter mobile app. Get in the game. Think smarter, Ticket Smarter. And as you see on our screen, if you're watching us on the video, not just hearing us on the podcast, promo code is Coast20 for $20 off an order of $300 or more. Again, let's continue and let's bring in 2 of my other guys. My wingman, Jason Powers, who was with me on this past weekend for the New Mexico Lobos win in the Mountain West Conference Tournament Championship game over San Diego State. Tyler Jones is also here with us live from the Jones Report. He's in the Southwest in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. He was there for the American Conference Tournament Championship win by UAB. We all had UAB beating Temple in the American Tournament. Tyler's going to have thoughts on the Big 12 as well. Welcome, guys. All right, Jason Powers, you first. We haven't talked to each other enough for the last 3 or 4 days. Thoughts on the bracket reveal and what they got right, or maybe more importantly, what they got wrong in your mind. Go ahead.
First of all, Mr. Reeves, it's St. Patrick's Day. Me and Tyler got some green on. I showered after our trip today.
Where's
the green at, sir?
I have like a Masters hat or a USF hat in the background. That's got to count for something, I guess. Here for the St. I'm not Irish, by the way, so that's another thing. On this.
I am.
Tyler's part like Irish, part Cherokee Indian, part NASCAR, and part college basketball, all molded into one thing.
I'm a mutt, basically, yes.
Yes. What did they get right and or wrong? Jason Powers first, then you, Tyler.
Couple of thoughts. An interesting comment made by the selection committee chair, Charles McClellan, basically said if New Mexico didn't win the tournament, they weren't getting in. So he mentioned a fifth bid stealer being New Mexico, because that was a little surprising to you and I. We thought once they won the semifinals that they were probably in, but he made it clear if they didn't win last night, they weren't in the tournament.
And they might not have even been the first team out. They might have been the third or fourth team out. But as we said, they erased all doubt. NC State erased all doubt. UAB today, Duquesne today, Oregon last night out in Vegas where we were. That's what this time of the year is all about. You are your own judge and jury to get in the tournament. And it's as crazy as we've seen in recent memory with how many teams took advantage of that, Jason.
The wildest Saturday of championship week that I can ever remember in my adult life. And I've heard a lot of pundits say 30, 35 years where there's never been that many bid stealers take away bids. I mean, it made the selection committee a little challenging because you had to squeeze the field down by 3 or 4 more teams. And he said 5 teams based on New Mexico. So I was a little surprised that St. John's wasn't even in the top 5 of the first 5 out. That surprised me a little bit with the name, Patino, the way they played the end of the year.
We kept talking about it. Right.
They played Connecticut really well in that semifinal game on Friday night. I was a little surprised on that. And how about my 3 Alabama teams? UAB, Alabama, and Auburn all get shipped to Spokane, Washington, of all places. Are you kidding me?
Yep. We were talking about that a little while ago. Tyler Jones, good to have you. What did the committee get right, maybe? Or more importantly, what did they get wrong, even if it's a couple of things?
Let me start off with where they got wrong, because I got to get this off my chest. The committee is just a joke. I mean, this is one of the worst selection committees that we've ever seen in the history of the NCAA tournament. How does Oklahoma not make the tournament playing in the best conference in America, the Big 12 Conference? Bar none. The Big 12 has been the best league in America for more than a decade. No ifs, no ands, or buts about it. And Oklahoma went toe-to-toe with the best of the best of the Big 12. Just a week ago, they nearly beat Houston at home. And they've gone through a number of injuries, a lot of adversity this year, and they had a really good non-conference resume. Oklahoma was robbed, cheated from, stolen from. They should be in the NCAA tournament. Virginia has no business being in the NCAA tournament. Colorado State, I can give a little leeway to. But Virginia over Oklahoma, to me, that was just abysmal. I thought St. John should have been as well, quite frankly, here. I like that Indiana State team, but I know it's kind of tough because you don't really have the resume. They didn't really get the opportunity to play some of the top teams this year. Teams didn't want to schedule them. So I have a big problem with Oklahoma not getting in. As far as what they got right, you look at the top seeds, for the most part, it all seemed pretty fair. With the 4 seeds, I think all of us knew for the last few days it was going to be those 4 seeds as your ones. Seeing Iowa State get the 2 spot was good to see. I think that Iowa State-Baylor game last week turned into a matchup of sorts to decide who was going to get to be the 2 and who got to be the 3. But as you guys have been alluding to, I think this entire show, does the committee even watch the conference tournaments anymore? I have an idea, guys. I know this might not be very popular, but I'll say it anyway. I think the only way that we can get the committee to start paying attention to conference tournaments, what if we played these things to start conference play and then go into conference play? Why not move the conference tournaments to January?
Well, because everybody wants them for the drama of what we just saw, and for March is the answer. But you're making a point on the absurdity of not counting the results by saying let's go all the way absurd and just play them at the beginning before you play the regular season.
Play them at the beginning, give the automatic bid, and then if you don't win the automatic bid in January, then it's put up or shut up time. You got to play a whole regular season to prove yourself.
Interesting theory on that. By the way, one thing real quick, I'm just looking at Oklahoma and the reason to exclude them. Right, so they were 46 in the net. Oklahoma played 16 quad one games. They only won 4 of them. They only won 4 out of the 16. So there's a lot of argument. You got a ton of chances to win games against the better teams on your schedule, and you didn't get it done. So I can understand that. I'm just looking here down the stretch of the season at what kind of opportunities they had at the very end of the year. They played Baylor at Baylor, a loss. They played Kansas at home, a loss. I'm talking late February. They played Oklahoma State, who's bad, and beat them. They played at Iowa State, lost. Played Houston, lost. Played Cincinnati, who's not in the field. They won. They played Texas, who's in the field, lost. Played TCU in the opening round of the Big 12 tournament, and they lost. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 losses in the final 8 opportunities against teams that are all in the field. You want to know, Mr. Jones, why you didn't see Oklahoma's name? That's what they're going to point to. Guaranteed that's what they're going to point to. I'm not saying it's right, but there are a lot of schools that are sitting back saying we didn't get 16 chances in quad one to lose 12 games. All right, Jason Powers, back to you for a second. Peg an upset for me. Give me an upset that stands out.
Boy, there's a couple juicy matchups. You got Wisconsin, James Madison, which is a very juicy matchup, and then you got Gonzaga and McNeese. We've talked about Will Wade and what he's done in McNeese. That is a very nerve-wracking game if you're Gonzaga in that first round. That game is at altitude. I know McNeese likes to run and gun. A sneaky upset. I know they're going to be the sexy pick for a lot of people. I think Northwestern's going to beat FAU in round 1. Kind of an under-the-radar team. Chris Collins. I think I know it's an 8-9 game.
Is they're injured. They're damaged, Northwestern, for the game. But FAU, what do we make of them? Blowing that game to Temple. They lost several games in the American Conference.
Yep.
Even some of their wins were close in the American.
And in Tyler's neck of the woods, what is the state of Kansas? What is their injury health history? I'm guessing that the committee gave them a 4 seed, which is a pretty high seed. I'm guessing they got pretty good information that those guys are going to play, McCullers and Dickinson, but maybe not.
We joked before you came on that Charles McClellan, the head of the committee, the SWAC commissioner, and the committee's talking about, they contacted Marquette about Tyler Kolek. Tyler Jones knows this. They contacted Kansas about Hunter Dickinson and Kevin McCullough. And, of course, the answer was, they're good. They're going to play. Right. Of course. What are they going to say? No, we're not sure if they can play seat us a little lower because of that. Of course they told them they're going to play.
Well, here's the thing when it comes to Kansas that I look at, guys. Getting McCullough and Hunter Dickinson back is a big deal. And we saw how bad they looked against Cincinnati without those guys on Wednesday night. But for me, the issues that I look at with Kansas are bigger than injuries to Hunter Dickinson and to Kevin McCullough here. They do not have enough shooters on this team. Johnny Furphy cannot do it all. Timberlake never really developed among their other guys. They just don't have enough shooters on this team. So I'm not worried for Kansas against Samford at all. I think they'll be fine that first round game, but playing Gonzaga the second round or McNeese State, either one, I think that's a loss for KU. I don't see them getting out of the first weekend here.
What about, Tyler, just a quick Big 12 take on Iowa State and how impressive they were last night? How dangerous are they in the East bracket? How dangerous are they for UConn if it comes to that? What's your opinion?
I think Iowa State is so hot right now. They look like one of the best teams in the country and really have turned a corner these last couple of weeks. And the thing that's impressed me about Iowa State is one thing that they're doing now that they weren't doing early in the season is they are beating the teams they're not supposed to. Getting the win against Baylor the other night, but then following that up with beating a Houston team where they were a heavy underdog. That's a team that's trending the right direction. We always try to find the teams here in March that have the momentum of sorts, riding the wave. That would be that Iowa State team. I don't think they match up well with UConn, though. I think Iowa State's ceiling is the Elite Eight. The only way they get Final Four is if somebody takes care of UConn, gets them out of the way for them. They're a good team, but UConn is ultimately, I think, going to be too much. I'd be surprised if UConn's not in the national championship game again.
Jason Powers, we saw New Mexico win the Mountain West tournament. Convey to the audience. We talked about it on the broadcast, but for those hearing us here on College Basketball Coast to Coast in our Selection Sunday Night Show, what an atmosphere. Ooh. What a tournament to be part of. And New Mexico won the tournament. Say something about the atmosphere and about New Mexico winning, if you would.
First off, we got to give a shout out to the operations staff in the Mountain West Conference. They solved a problem for us pregame, and they really came through. So kudos to that staff.
Technical issue, but we got it worked out through the Mountain West, and so thank you to them and the Thomas and Mack Center.
Did you make a run to Sam Ash, guys?
We did not have to go make the run to the store like we had before with Tyler Jones when the equipment didn't show up. In this case, not everything showed up. We got it fixed and we got on the air. It doesn't matter how, it just matters did you. And then what again? Yes, survive and advance with the equipment. And then Jason Powers, what an atmosphere there. We can't stress it enough with the New Mexico and San Diego State fans, but really that whole semifinal and championship Saturday night. Wow, for the Mountain West.
It was tremendous. That Thomas and Mack Center is a great little venue. The bottom part of that bowl was filled to the rafters. Red all over the place for both the Aztecs and Lobos. You can tell those fan bases are really into their program. Football programs are not great, so the basketball is probably number one at those universities. And what a job by Patino and those two guards, Jaden House and Mashburn Jr. We talked about it. Those two scored 49, and those two plus Toppin scored 62 out of the 69 points for freaking New Mexico. And San Diego State, to me, I thought they were a little overseeded. I was a little surprised they were a 5 seed, San Diego State. I think they have my UAB Blazers in round 1. Little surprised there. I think they could be on upset alert. But, boy, great atmosphere. With the semifinal games were good Friday night as well. We had 2 good ones Friday night. But, boy, that's a good tournament. If you've never been to that tournament, that's a place you want to go if you're out west.
A blast to be there. And, again, thank you to Gloria Navarez, the commissioner, Javen Headland, who we worked with and dealt with the Mountain West, and everybody. And T.C. Martin, the unelected mayor of Vegas, helping us out. We broadcasted the game. T.C. and Jason and I on the call last night. And New Mexico could be dangerous against Clemson. I'm sorry. While we're on college basketball coast to coast, you know what? Let's include Deshaun Tate, who's been waiting patiently. Mr. Tate's Take the podcast. He's in ACC country in Atlanta. We're covering all points of the globe. We've been in the Northeast with Ari and with Adam Zagoria. This is why it's coast to coast. We've been in the upper Midwest with Chris Daubertine. That's where he's based. Bloggingthebracket.com. Matt Zimix all the way west in Phoenix. The Powers and I, we might be over the jet lag by April. We were in Vegas. We've gotten back. Tyler's locking down the Southwest and Big 12 country. I still want your opinion on UAB in a second, Tyler Jones. But Mr. Tate's Take the podcast. Welcome here on College Basketball Coast to Coast. Also 92.9, The Game, the sports radio station in Atlanta is where you hear Deshaun's insight on the NCAA tournament. So it's good to have you here on our Selection Sunday Night Show.
He's a Spartan fan.
I understand. And Sparty is in, so that's a good thing. But I want to talk ACC. Is Clemson not on upset alert with New Mexico? Correct me if I'm wrong. They got bombed by Boston College. They lost late in the year to Virginia Tech. They lost late in the year to Notre Dame. Look out for little Patino and New Mexico against Clemson. Deshaun Tate, a quick reaction to that take.
It's almost, and thank you guys for having me so much. It's almost taking everything out of me not to put New Mexico in my Final Four. That's how confident I am in New Mexico. I think it's
why.
Well, I think that the number one, I do believe whether you think that they were the best team in the conference this year or not. I do think that is probably the 3rd best conference in the country. Maybe not top to bottom and this and that, but certainly in the top 5 and 6 teams that they have within the conference. But I love the guard play, obviously, with House and Mashburn. Maybe not the, best coaching that I always see out of Patino, but I think that he has learned some lessons from his time in Minneapolis when he was with the Gophers. And I've just loved everything. I was always interested. There's always one particular game that stands out to me every single time it's announced on Selection Sunday. Between them and Grand Canyon, I think is the 2 games that I was just like, okay, one of these has to be on my bracket, at least in the first round. It's taken everything out of me not to take Arizona or to take Arizona to continue on to the Final Four, where as of right now, that is where I have them. But if it's not Arizona, I am so sure that it's going to be New Mexico. I expect for them to be the team
So
that is
interesting.
representing them.
I don't mean to interrupt. That's in the West bracket together
Mhm.
while we do this
Mhm.
on the fly. New Mexico Clemson is the 6-11 game. New Mexico's the 11 seed. Grand Canyon is the 12 on the top half of the West bracket playing St. Mary's. You think both St. Mary's and Clemson could be bye-bye after game one? And then the bracket's wide open in the middle, if that's the case.
I think both of those teams will be bye-bye after the first weekend. I just, the Mountain West has been a lot better than what I think people have really taken notice to this year. I don't know, time difference if you're on East Coast or whatever, what have you. Again, mid-major conference or high major, maybe not Power 5, but high major at least. I expect for New Mexico to be representing the Mountain West in if it's not Arizona, it will be them representing the Mountain West again for the second year in a row, with last year being San Diego State.
Deshaun, great stuff. Tyler, you've been with us a little while, and I know you're busy, and I want to let you go here in a moment or two. You were there at the American Conference. What a wide open, wacky tournament it turned out to be. In our market in Tampa Bay, South Florida had it wide open, as it turns out, to win the automatic bid. They can't beat UAB. Florida Atlantic was already in the tournament. Temple, which we didn't know, we thought they were in, we didn't know for sure. Temple beats them. Temple had a shot at the automatic bid with a losing record. You were around all of this weekend in Fort Worth. A couple of thoughts on what you saw, and UAB in the tournament now as a 12 seed against San Diego State, the 5 seed in the East Regional.
It was a crazy tournament where the lightning struck literally there at the arena. They had a power outage at one point earlier this week, but a lot of excitement. Great story with Temple getting to the final, especially after the season they've gone through with a 10-game losing streak at one point this year. We've heard about the gambling scandal going on with that program too. But nonetheless, you look at what all unfolded there. That UAB team, Andy Kennedy, the last 3 seasons has had 3 completely different teams. And yet look at the job that he's done. TJ, you and I called the Conference USA title game a couple years ago when they won that and advanced the NCAA tournament. And now here they are doing the same thing again, finding a way to get it done. Andy Kennedy, I think, is a really good coach. I think he's going to be the next head coach at West Virginia here in a couple of weeks. This all said and done.
Told you.
On that one. But, I mean, he's got scores, Gaines, Eric Gaines. Velasquez had a big tournament.
Velasquez was incredible today. Yes.
Okay, and so now you look at that game with San Diego State as a 12-5. You just saw that UAB team play their way in. You're just saying, be careful.
San Diego State cannot shoot the ball very well either.
I really like UAB to win that game. I'll tell you that right now.
Interesting. Anything else, Tyler? Then we'll let you scoot along. Anything else on this Selection Sunday night show?
I have to push my Big 12 propaganda. I will say Houston is the best team in America and they will win the national title. I don't care what happened in that game against Iowa State when it didn't matter. Houston didn't have anything to play for, and Iowa State had everything to play for. So I think Houston's going to be very good. Iowa State, I told you earlier, I like everything about them potentially going to the Elite Eight. I don't think they can beat UConn, though. Baylor, that's a complete team, and I think their best basketball is still in front of them. With Kansas, that the talent is there. The argument I would make in their favor is that they haven't played their best basketball this year. I mean, you could point to, well, they looked really good in the non-con and all that, but that was even before Johnny Furphy was really involved. So if they can take this week off that they've had and really use it to their benefit, don't sleep on the Kansas Jayhawks just yet. It's not impossible that they could potentially put this together.
Samford could knock them out, though, on night one, and I don't know how healthy they're going to be with McCullough and Dickinson. They're going to say they're healthy. I don't know how healthy they're going to be. Great stuff. Tyler Jones with the Jones Report with the pod, Chat Sports as well, part of our coverage on college basketball coast to coast, one of our wingmen here on the program. I always love it, my friend. Thank you. Yes. We'll be back in touch with all of this, the madness and the mayhem coming later this week, next week.
I'll see y'all boys in Phoenix here in a few weeks.
We're looking forward to that. Thank you, Tyler. Jason Powers, I know you've been busy. We've been talking to each other a bunch. We were doing this Sunday morning show there, middle of the night. Any other thoughts from you? And then I'm going to wrap with Deshaun for a few minutes and be done on Selection Sunday night. Anything else that we left out? Any Final Four team you like, upset, something else that struck you?
A team that I like, I think that can match up, especially with Edie. I like Creighton. I like Creighton in the Midwest. They got scores. They got some size. They got Trey Alexander, who can be the guy that scores at the end of the game. They need a bucket. They got Shireman. I like Creighton. They can score, but now they're starting to play a little better defense. Look out for Creighton in the Midwest to potentially take down Purdue.
Again, who do you trust there? Deshaun, you can jump in. Who do you trust out of Purdue, out of Tennessee with Rick Barnes as the 2 seed, Creighton, who just lost to Providence on the neutral floor? Do you trust damaged Kansas? Shall I keep going? Do you trust Gonzaga, who we keep talking about could lose? Now we're to South Carolina that just got whacked by Auburn and took some losses at the end of the year. We're all the way down to the 6th seed. Who do we trust? Do we trust Texas? Do we trust Utah State that got beat in the semifinals of the Mountain West tournament by San Diego? Who do we trust in the Midwest to be in Phoenix? Deshaun, I'm kind of asking. It's rhetorical, but I'm kind of asking. Who do we trust?
Well, you have a ton of untrustworthy teams, not only this year, but of all of those, all of them have been kind of looking to break through to a Final Four, and none of them have really been able to do it outside of Kansas, which we already have reservations about. And typically in years like this where they don't look as good as we thought they would, I think they started out ranked number 1 in the country, if I'm not mistaken. They tend to stand in their own way during years like this. I remember there was a Bucknell team when they were having a similar season and things like that. So Northern Iowa is another one at that time too. But probably the most trustworthy one here is probably going to be Creighton. I think if I'm not mistaken, they might have went to an Elite 8 last year. You know, sometimes when you're on the verge of being able to break through, you get so close and you don't get it done. You typically sometimes tend to do it the year after. Not that I trust them a whole lot because they're usually one that I stay away from. Texas is always the team that I want to like a lot more than I do, but they never give me a reason to like them as much as I would like to. Purdue, I just can't. Purdue is going to be treated much like another program that has built a reputation for themselves, being Gonzaga. People are going to stay away from both of those teams because they don't feel like they can trust them. I have a feeling if Purdue found a way to get all the way to a Final Four, to a national championship, whether that be to play Houston in it or whether that be to play UConn, it's going to look very similar to Gonzaga in 2021 when they played up just against a much more superior Baylor team. I have a hard time trusting any of those teams. If I had to pick one, because Rick Barnes surely isn't it would have to be Creighton, and honestly, it's really by default.
Jason Powers, pick it up. We've been talking about Tennessee. We watched the SEC tournament intently, and for the first time since the early 80s, I believe it was 1983, was the last time that 3 of the top seeds didn't even make the semifinal, and Tennessee was one of them. Total no-show against Mississippi State. How concerned? They got a 2 next to their name. They got a tremendous go-to player in Dalton Knecht, but how concerned should we be right now about the Vols being able to get much beyond like the opening round or the opening weekend?
I hate to say it might be the best thing that could have happened to them because the pressure that Rick Barnes would have been under being a 1 seed as opposed to being a 2, and I know 2's still a big number there, but if they'd have been a 1 seed and rolling through the SEC, that pressure would have even amped up even more. I think a loss like that might have been good for them. You got 3 or 4 days to kind of decompress a little bit from the regular season, get everybody healthy. Knecht is still a guy that you and I both believe can take over a game in the last 6-7 minutes and score against any type of player.
But where was it in the second half against Mississippi State when they needed it?
I get it.
I don't know.
You've seen these teams in conference too much too. You're going to see new teams, new schemes, new players. So I think the motivation level and the excitement level by some of these star players will be a little bit higher. But another team, I think, how is Florida a 7 seed and Clemson is a 6? I don't get that.
I don't either. Florida with some big wins, including a neutral floor victory over Alabama.
They're dangerous. They're dangerous.
In Nashville. You were talking about Auburn as well. They avenged a Mississippi State loss today. They also avenged the loss, or Mississippi State yesterday, avenged the Florida loss today. And the Auburn Tigers could be dangerous as well coming up out of the East bracket. The problem is they're in the way of UConn. Right. Mr. Powers, anything else? Are we good?
We are good. Thanks for all your hard work over the weekend. You did a great job on all the fronts. Appreciate you. Sorry I kept you up late a couple nights. I didn't mean to wake you up early from playing some cards and all that stuff. And the TV wouldn't turn off in the room and all that stuff. So
We had a crazy week in Vegas, but a great tournament with the Mountain West tournament and New Mexico's win. Jason Powers, great stuff. Thank you. Powers on Sports Podcast. You find him, and we appreciate him stopping by. Deshaun Tate, you and me, to wrap it up here for the last few minutes. By the way, on the College Basketball Coast to Coast Selection Sunday show, we keep promoting Ticket Smarter, sponsor Ticket Smarter mobile app. Deshaun's getting hit up just like I am and everybody else. Where do I get my tickets? Where do I get my tickets? Go to Ticket Smarter. Go to the Ticket Smarter mobile app. Best secondary market prices you're going to find with their algorithms. Purchase safe and secure. Promo code COAST20. $20 off your order of $300 or more. You will not get in to places like the Barclays Center, on and on down the list at all these different venues. Pittsburgh, Spokane, Omaha. You're not going to get in for under $300 for a couple of tickets. Trust me, for the best seats. Use our promo code COAST20. Take $20 off your order. Get in the game. Think smarter, ticket smarter. Promo code COAST20 from us here at College Basketball Coast to Coast. So whether you're seeing us or whether you're hearing us, you know about the promo code there. Final few minutes. What else? The floor is yours. What else strikes you from the bracket? Upsets, teams to watch out for. What else? Deshaun Tate of 92.9 The Game, the FM sports radio station in Atlanta. Tate's Take the podcast as well. What else, Deshaun?
I just think, when you start looking at some of these different upsets, I'm gonna be honest with you. Not that I expect to get a perfect bracket, because, if so, I'd have that $1 million in my pocket and everything else that they throw around. But I don't think this one's going to be nearly as difficult to predict, especially considering the fact that you have to assume, the upsets and so forth. Of course, there's the infamous 5-12 matchups. I think there are going to be some upsets within those when you start, looking at teams. I'm not as much looking at the San Diego State UAB. St. Mary's and Grand Canyon, I think, is pretty much a given at this point. I love Grand Canyon. I love everything that they've been doing all year long, especially under Drew, the way that he coaches. They've dominated teams all year long, not only just finding a way to walk away with wins. If nobody else knows a little bit more about James Madison, it's this guy right here, Mr. Michigan State, the first game of the season, and seeing what James Madison has put together all year long. And I just think that's kind of like a bad matchup for Wisconsin if this thing starts to turn into, one of those up and down transition. I call them elevator and escalator games. 6 o'clock, 12 o'clock, up and down, up and down, up and down. James Madison has that ability. I'm not sure if Wisconsin can keep up, so that's another potential upset. And then everybody's going to
31 wins for James Madison.
That's a ton of wins. You don't get to 31 wins off of luck and hitting buzzer beaters every night. But there are some other interesting ones. I'm not as much of a believer in Iowa State as a lot of other people are. I think, what ends up happening is everybody's has so much focus on, right, NFL free agency and where's Saquon going and where's Kirk Cousins going and paying attention to, combine and everything else. What we tend to do in the way that our brains are trained is, what else is coming up? Oh, yeah, college basketball. Time to fill out some brackets. Let's see who's been hot lately. That's where you're going to make the mistake of catching teams like Iowa State, who won their conference tournament. I really like Illinois, to be honest with you. They're similar to Texas, in my opinion, where I want to like them more every year, but they always find a way to let me down, TJ. I think they are inarguably one of the best players, if not the best player in the country. I know everybody loves Dalton Connect behind Zach Edey, but I really do believe that Terrence Shannon is right there. He's one of my favorites. I think that there's, a possibility that Illinois could potentially make a deep run. I'm not putting I'm not putting Breslin's trust fund on it or her college fund or anything like that. But I think that there are some chances there. Colgate, how about the toothpaste school? I could see this, TJ, being notifications blowing up, coming from everywhere. They've made the last 3 or 4 consecutive NCAA tournaments. Those are returning players. Those aren't transfers and people that are coming in and out. Those are returning players. I think they could take a very, recently successful Baylor team who is on the younger side than we're typically used to seeing down in the first round. And I'm going to try and give one more here.
Baylor and Scott Drew, they've won a national title, but they've had some upset losses as well.
Sure. They
have a high seed. I remember 2015, they lost to Georgia State.
Sure.
And I believe that was pre-Scott Drew. That might have been pre-Scott Drew. Then again, that might have been him for that one. But they had another loss fairly recently, too, as a high seed. So it's not unheard of. So Colgate, watch out in that one. and we talked about New Mexico against Clemson. You're in
I love 'em.
ACC. You're in ACC country. Did it surprise you that Virginia is
Yes.
in? Did it
Yes.
surprise you that Clemson is as high as a 6th seed
Yes.
with
Yes.
those losses at the end and a bad loss? Here again, we disregard the conference tournament where they have a bad loss to Boston College on a neutral floor, and it doesn't apparently matter for Clemson to see them that high.
And it didn't. And we're talking about a team prior to yesterday's conference tournament championship game that had, in my opinion, 2 locks. I'm talking about lock now. That was Duke and that was Carolina. Again, I'm just talking about locks, let alone to see Clemson get a seed that high. We're not even going to get into Virginia, who, is just going to really have a hard time trying to, transition into, they get down anywhere remotely close to 10 points and the game is pretty much over because they have such a hard time in being able to come back. So I out of the ACC, I do like NC State though, probably a little bit more than other people. I know that mentioned.
Give me the 60-second take. What did they find? You've been watching them all year long. They found something. What did they find to win these games with Duke and with Carolina in particular?
Well, I think that it was just, honestly, I think it was just kind of like the confidence factor for them. I mean, for them to be able to put together, obviously going against Carolina, that if you're not going to find confidence in that, then you're not going to find it anywhere. But I think even using a guy like a DJ Burns, who we look at him and I can't even guess the size and the weight that he is. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just go back and pay attention.
Looks like a defensive tackle.
He really does. Yeah. But he can handle the ball a lot better than I think some people, can see. Yes, he's a load in the middle, but he has very good IQ. He's very cerebral, can pass the ball. I'm not calling him Draymond Green or anything like that. But if you're looking for that big baby Davis and a guy who plays, with a lot of that moxie, if you will, a lot of that passion, he's one of them. I like TCU too. I know that they're not in the ACC per se, but I also like TCU. I think TCU can make a nice little run. It didn't surprise me, TJ.
They're in the way of Purdue, by the way. If Purdue can get by the 16 seed this time, which they did not last year, TCU's potentially in front of them in the 8-9 game. Go ahead.
I'm not surprised the least bit. I think I've been saying it for months. If we find a way to see North Carolina and Arizona, a potential matchup built around Caleb Love and everything else, I think that's what the people want to see. However, you can't be blindsided by that because they both have to win games in order to get there. So I think it's going to make out to be a very good, March Madness. Unpredictability. This is the best time of the year, and I'm so excited. I'm really at a loss for words. I can't wait.
All right, couple more things. Deshaun Tate with us. If you're only hearing us in podcast form, you're seeing us as we wrap up the Selection Sunday night show. I love Deshaun as a resource. And again, we've had a litany of guests. If you're joining the show late, rewatch it on YouTube, College Basketball Coast to Coast. Rewatch it on Facebook as well. CBB Coast to Coast Twitter handle. All of those social outlets, you can re-watch the whole show with all the takes. Chris Daubertine, bloggingthebracket.com. Ari Russell, Adam Zagoria. We're both at the Big East tournament, giving full breakdown of UConn's win and the other teams, the Big East. Big East, again, only got 3 teams in.
Surprising.
That is interesting. They didn't get a 4th, much less a 5th. No St. John's, no Seton Hall. So again, those guys were there. Matt Zimick talked Western basketball with us. We love his insight. Tyler Jones was talking Southwest, Big 12. He was at the American Conference. Jason Powers and I were all the way out west at the Mountain West Conference Tournament Championship win by New Mexico over San Diego State. And now I've got Deshaun here kind of talking SEC, ACC in the South. He's based in Atlanta. You got a great cross-section of guests here tonight. But I want to come back to, we haven't talked about Duke. I haven't mentioned the name Duke at all. The only reason I bring it up, they have pieces. They are angry. They have a coach that's won a national title before, that's been there with Mike Krzyzewski as an assistant to win national titles. Should we maybe take a peek at Duke in a South, region that's got an injured Kolek for Marquette? Houston is at the top. I know Duke is maybe the Sweet 16 game, but Kentucky doesn't stop anybody. Wisconsin may be beaten by JMU, so that could be Duke's matchup in the second round. Should we be talking a little more about Duke since you're in and around the ACC, or do you think they are too damaged?
Yeah, it's funny because in that particular region, you have 3 teams being them, Kentucky and Wisconsin that all went to the Final Four back in 2015 when
Correct.
Duke won their last national championship, I believe it is. But I think that people have their reservations out on Duke, and for good reason. If we're talking about Coach K, because that's what sticks out like a sore thumb, is the coaching, the guy who has not proven himself. Obviously, last year being his first year, but they went up against a much tougher, if not anything else, definitely tougher Tennessee team that put them out. And I don't think that they've really necessarily learned their lesson. You run up on a Houston, I think you're going to have different kinds of problems. Everybody's going to be rooting against you. If you make it out of the first round and you potentially play up against the James Madison. But this is unfamiliar territory for Duke because nobody's talking about them. They're usually one of the first names that we bring up. We don't have to wait until we've been on the show for an hour and a half to bring up Duke for the first time. This is new to them. I would love to see how this is going to change things for them because nobody's really talking about them. But I think there are some concerns because they are such a young team. I get it. The point guard.
I'll use the word soft. They look soft against North Carolina at home.
They do.
They look soft against NC State in the tournament game. And now you're one and done if you're soft in this. So they've got to address that. They've got to silence that, I think, coming up in the opening round game with Vermont.
They do. And here's the other part. You know, this is a tournament that is about quite a few things. The coaches, right? We're talking about him being unproven. Teams that can go deep. I'm not sure how I feel about how deep they can go, at least if not nothing else. The other key component being experience. They don't have nearly enough of those things. And I think that's kind of something that's starting to show. Sure, you got some 5-star freshmen and sophomores and everything else, but these are only players that are either entering March Madness for their very first time in their career or entering March Madness for the second time, which is bringing on, new expectations for them in their roles. So I think that you're definitely mentioning soft. I think that is a major piece to it. Do they have pieces? Absolutely. But I always
they have guards.
They have guards.
They can shoot threes.
I always warn people.
They have a big man. They have a big man that can score and get buckets if they need him in the low post. So they have pieces, like we're talking about. Can they put the pieces together? Finish up on Duke.
I always warn people of these things, and this isn't just about Duke, but this is just about winning national championships. Because when you think about winning national championships, you typically think Duke. This isn't an NCAA tournament that has been widely known since Duke won a national championship in that 15-year I was talking about, where they rely so heavily upon one and dones. Think about it, because I know that some of the Winslow and Okafor and Jones, they did it at that time. In 16, Villanova didn't have one. In 17, North Carolina had one, Tony Bradley. In 18, Villanova didn't have one. 19, Virginia did not have one. 20, COVID did not have one. 21, Baylor did not have one. 22, Kansas did not have a one and done.
I'm not hearing a lot of one and dones.
Exactly. There are no one and dones. 23 even. Connecticut didn't have any one and dones. So when you start filling out this bracket, hopefully I call that a little free space on the Tate's Take bingo card a little bit.
Yeah. Yep.
That doesn't round out well for programs like Duke and Kentucky.
Because they've got some of those.
All of those.
Let's wrap it up with a couple of things that I keep asking everybody else. Again, back to an upset. I think you love New Mexico like I do. Did you say potential Final Four team? You said
absolutely.
I don't know that they can get that far, but I saw them firsthand at courtside about 24 hours ago as we do this live on Selection Sunday night. So maybe I have recency bias, but I just sat there 25 feet away from Jalen House and Jamal Mashburn Jr. bombing shots for 4 straight days on the neutral floor. They've got guards. They've got size. I don't know that they get to the Final Four, but watch out for them as an upset. Give me another upset. You were talking earlier about a couple of other ones, right? Give me another one.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been watching this Grand Canyon team all year long. I think Grand Canyon is potentially, in that space as well. Potential upset. South Dakota State always. This won't be new. South Dakota State has a good team each and every single year. I think that that's a potential. I wouldn't go as far as saying I feel as confident about them as I do about Grand Canyon.
Iowa State was once a 2 seed in the middle 2000s and lost to Hampton, a 15 seed. It happened.
It would not surprise me if history repeated itself. I think the last one, again, like I said, don't be surprised if you pick up your phone and you look at it and you're getting all sorts of just different notifications about how a toothpaste school just beat a former, a defending national champion from, just literally 2 or 3 years ago, to end up, breaking out and going on to the second round.
Colgate maybe against Baylor. Deshaun Tate Final Four has to have UConn in it. Yes.
Yeah. National champs.
And has Houston in it?
Absolutely.
Who else is in it? Maybe you have only one, or do you have 2 other teams that are in it with them? While you mull it all over, do you have another team?
I've not a number 1 seed by any means. I'm really on the fence about Arizona. It's tough to imagine going into your own backyard. That's a lot of pressure. We don't see that often. Obviously, right. Michigan State in 2009 and Butler in 2010. That's going to be tough, but I do think they are one of the best teams in the country. I'm on the fence between Arizona and New Mexico right now. If I have to pick one, I'll say Arizona, but the other one is going to be the region that with so many teams that I don't believe in, starting in the Midwest with the number 1 seed.
I know,
Purdue.
We talked about it.
I think that's crazy.
Somebody's got to be there out of Purdue, Tennessee, Creighton, Kansas, Gonzaga, South Carolina. We're all the way down to the 7 seed Texas. Somebody's got to emerge out of that and be in Arizona.
TJ, it's so easy to pick Kansas here, and that's another reason why I have a concern. I think that team, as much as I don't want to say it because I don't believe in them a ton either, I think that team is going to be Creighton.
Interesting. Tate's Take the Podcast, 92.9 The Game, FM Sports Radio in Atlanta is where you find Deshaun Tate breaking down March Madness. My friend, we've got the first 4 coming up. Hey, quick reaction from you because you're getting the last says in here late in the show. Mm-hmm. Quick reaction. It's wild because all the bid stealers took the spots at 11 or 12 on the seed lines. We got 10 seeds in Dayton. We got a 10 seed matchup with Boise State and Colorado, and then we got another 10 seed matchup
Virginia, Colorado State
with Virginia and Colorado State. They plug in as 10 seeds.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. The state of Colorado getting in, but having to play an extra game, I guess, between both of those.
And Colorado having to travel to Dayton.
Exactly, in Dayton. The whole state of Colorado is going to be in Dayton for about 48 hours or so. But I will say that it's been well represented. By the way, the Mountain West is going to be well represented, not only in the NCAA tournament, but also even in Dayton with Colorado State and Boise State both going. So I think Dayton is going to be it's going to be interesting. I'm not overly surprised that Oklahoma didn't get in. I thought that was probably the bigger shocker, if not nothing else. St. John's. I thought St. John's played some really good basketball, especially after the rant from Pitino that he had to apologize for. But I'm not sure. Seton Hall maybe another one. I think the biggest surprise is that the Big East only got 3 teams in. I think that was
the 4th team should have been whom though? St. John's, Seton Hall. Who should the 4th team have been?
Take your pick, but I don't believe that either that Virginia should have gotten in over either one of those teams. How do they get in 3 in a better conference, a more competitive conference than the ACC? ACC got in a couple more teams. I don't see how that happened.
All right, we do have this. The selection committee, CBS, and the cable partners of Warner Brothers Discovery, the Turner channels, TNT, TBS, and True TV have announced the start time. So all of that is coming out. We know about the first 4 teams on Tuesday and Wednesday, the first 8 teams, 4 games, Tuesday and Wednesday. Are you ready, Deshaun Tate? The first game of the 32 games, Thursday and Friday from Charlotte, North Carolina at 12:15 Eastern Time is your Sparties and Mississippi State. That is the first of 32 in the 8-9 game in the West Regional. I'm just going over the high spots as I do this on the fly. Also early is Duquesne and BYU on Thursday in the noon Eastern Time hour. Akron and Creighton early. Also early, Long Beach and Arizona. They are playing in Salt Lake at noon Thursday. I'm looking at Thursday, prime time Thursday night. Texas playing the winner of Colorado State and Virginia. We'll lead off. The CBS game is Kentucky. What a surprise, playing the Oakland Grizzlies, who I saw in the Horizon League, called the game on TuneIn on this college basketball Coast to Coast channel. Can Oakland and Trey Townsend, the big man in the low block,
And Rocket
from
Watts.
Michigan,
Rocket Watts
and company, they're up there in up in the northern
Rochester.
suburbs of Michigan, in Rochester. And let's see if they have something for Kentucky. That's a primetime game Thursday while we go down the list. Our man Adam Zagoria has the game times put up on his Zags blog here while we do this live on the college basketball Coast to Coast platforms. And again, if you're hearing us in podcast form, you can already look up the game times and know this. But Deshaun and I are kind of finding this out together. Iowa State, South Dakota State is also early Thursday evening. The last games of Thursday night are Kansas and Samford in Salt Lake, 7:55 local time, 9:55 Eastern time. In Omaha, Drake, Washington State is the final game of the night Thursday. Friday, the first game in Brooklyn is the 8-9 Florida Atlantic Northwestern game, just after noon on CBS. Colgate Baylor in Memphis is right after that. That's an 11:40 local time game in Memphis Thursday afternoon. Also Thursday afternoon, Stetson and UConn are playing in Brooklyn in the afternoon. Also in the afternoon, New Mexico and Clemson in Memphis. Thursday night is Vermont and Duke in Brooklyn. What a surprise. That's going to be a tough ticket. Again, Ticket Smarter, promo code COAST20. I'll put it, you know what? I'll put it up on the screen for our live show. For the Duke game in Brooklyn, rest assured, Deshaun Tate, verification, right? You're not getting in with 2 tickets in the lower level of the Barclays Center for under $300.
Not
Use
even
the promo
close.
code COAST20 and take $20 off for the Duke game with Vermont Friday night. That's in the Friday night slot. I'm also looking for later on Friday night in Spokane. That is Alabama and Charleston. Also Friday night in Brooklyn, James Madison, Wisconsin, a late night Friday night game. We're going to be weary by that time. That's like game 30 out of 32. Let's see what happens. The last game of the night is Spokane Friday night, 7 Pacific, 10 Eastern, Grand Canyon, St. Mary's. You're saying upset alert as well. And as you see on the screen on college basketball Coast to Coast, use our promo code COAST20 if you're going to any of those games. Memphis, Brooklyn, Pittsburgh, Charlotte, Spokane, Omaha. Use the promo code COAST20 at Ticket Smarter for $20 off. So a little bit on the game times. Any reaction? I gave a barrage of game times.
Well,
the marquee teams are going to be at night a lot of the time, like a Duke or a Carolina or some of those. But go ahead.
I guess, I don't know, maybe I guess for my own personal interest, I'm never really much of a guy who likes, it's too much anticipation, leading up to seeing, quote unquote, your team play. To be the very first game at the top of Thursday, I think is a pretty good thing for those who are like me and love Michigan State. But there's only enough room in this in this town for one MSU, TJ. So I guess we can finally settle that score on Thursday.
Mississippi State is big and physical. Michigan State always plays physical. That game may be 51-50 right off the bat on Thursday. We'll see. Mr. Deshaun Tate, thank you. You're going to close the show. You're the show closer. Thank you, my friend.
TJ. I appreciate you for having me.
Night. All right. Check him out, Tate's Take Hoops, on social media as well. Thank you, Deshaun. We thank all of you for being with us. Again, first 4 games Tuesday and a Wednesday night in Dayton, then 32 games. 16 Thursday, 16 more on Friday. We're anxious for all of it. My thanks again to the litany of guests that were with me earlier in the program. Great stuff across the board from all of our guests. Matt Zimick, Adam Zagoria, Tyler Jones, Jason Powers, Chris Daubertine, Ari Russell, and Deshaun Tate. You heard from everybody here on College Basketball Coast to Coast. I'm merely TJ Reeves. We get ready for these different games and upsets. Watch out for New Mexico as an upset-minded team. I love James Madison against Wisconsin. I know Wisconsin got into the Big Ten title game with Illinois. Great win for them against Purdue, but they took a lot of losses down the stretch of the season, and JMU can play. Those guys can play. What about UAB against San Diego State? San Diego State veteran, physical team, but UAB plays their way in. That's a 12-5 game. Look out for that one in the East Regional for your upsets. Everybody fill out your brackets. We're going to have a blast. We'll be back with more previews and recaps of all the college basketball action. We'll even go live on the social platforms, on the TuneIn channel, etc. coming up here on College Basketball Coast to Coast. For all the guests, I'm merely TJ Reeves. Thank you for watching us tonight on the College Basketball Coast to Coast Selection Sunday Night Show live on all of the platforms. Enjoy the madness. We're back later this week.